Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Today we continue our Top Pilot series by looking at another period in Star Wars. We've already covered the original trilogy, now we're moving on to the sequel trilogy. We'll be taking a look at some of the most talented pilots in this period of Star Wars history, and we'll be rating them based on their training background, their piloting abilities, their tactics, and their survivability. Because it takes more than just some instincts and force powers to be a good pilot. There are some other factors to consider as well. Also, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification button down so you don't miss out on the rest of this series. Also, don't forget to leave a comment down below about which pilot you like the best in our list. Decades of demilitarization and low funding has led to a drought in pilot talent within the New Republic Defense Force. But still, the New Republic Defense Force remains the largest military force in the known galaxy, which means it had one of the better pipelines for developing skilled pilots for starfighters. Poe Dameron joined the NRDF and was privileged enough to be trained by legendary rebel pilot Wedge Antilles. He did really well in our last video. Wedge considered Poe Dameron as one of his best students, if not the best student, which is saying a lot. This is the same guy who trained Temmin Wexley, Thane Kyrell, and even Luke Skywalker learned a few tricks from Wedge. We should also mention that before Poe Dameron joined the New Republic Defense Force, he was actually a spice runner, so there's that experience on the other side of the law as well. We rate Poe Dameron's training at 7 out of 10. Now, Poe Dameron was the son of a rebel trooper and a rebel pilot. His mother, Shara Bey, was one of those special rebels who had the reflexes and craziness to pilot the RZ-1 A-Wing Interceptor. These were essentially cockpits strapped onto two large thruster engines. Not even Luke Skywalker dared fly one of these. During the war, the A-Wing was considered the fastest production sublight-speed ship in the galaxy. It was also extremely difficult to control. At the age of 6, Poe Dameron actually hopped into the cockpit of his mother's RZ-1 A-Wing and learned how to fly it, which is super impressive. It's like hopping into a Bugatti without even knowing how to drive. It takes a lot of skill to pull something off like this without dying. This also leads me to think that maybe Poe Dameron is borderline force sensitive. He clearly sniffed out that Holdo was a dark side force user who wanted to sabotage the Resistance by ramming their last ship into the First Order fleet. Joking, but worth a consideration, actually. On top of that, we only need to look at his brilliant maneuvers during the skirmish over Takodana or his own take on the trench run and reactor dash during the assault on Star Killer Base to know that he belongs in the top 1% of the top 1%. Which is why we rate Poe Dameron's piloting skills as 8 out of 10. While in the New Republic Defense Force, Poe Dameron would achieve the rank of Commander and be assigned to lead Rapier Squadron, which itself was a very elite unit comprised of T-85 X-Wings. Although his job was mainly to patrol space lanes and protect civilians from piracy, Poe eventually ran into the First Order in the border regions. Frustrated with the New Republic's non-engagement policy when it comes to the First Order, Poe Dameron eventually leaves the New Republic and joins the Resistance military force. He would quickly rise through the ranks of the Resistance Starfighter Corps and eventually command both Red and Blue Squadron during some very important missions which were crucial in keeping the movement alive. His performance during the evacuation of Dakar proves that he is definitely an elite pilot. He single-handedly outwitted the entire First Order fleet and got close enough to the First Order siege dreadnought to disable all of its point defense turrets. Tactical-wise, we rate Poe Dameron at an excellent 9 out of 10, regardless of what some paper-pushing former politician might think. But in Holdo's defense, Poe Dameron is a bit too aggressive and a bit too bold sometimes when it comes to taking on certain types of missions. And while Poe Dameron might survive the mission, his wingmates who are less skilled than him might not. Still, Poe Dameron is one of those kind of individuals who you never really expect to get shot down, even when they are involved in a very hairy dogfight. Poe Dameron's mastery of a starfighter combined with his very capable astromech BB-8 means if anyone's going to come back from a suicide mission, it's probably going to be Black Leader. We give Poe Dameron a survivability rating of 9 out of 10. Even though two of my closest friends are named Ben, it's probably a good idea to never fully trust someone whose name is Ben, especially if you catch them worshipping the helmet of their dead grandfather. Ben Solo was Star Wars royalty, the son of the great Han Solo and majestic Princess Leia. He was also the nephew to the legendary Jedi Luke Skywalker. And just like how Will Smith's kids have struggled to find their own place in the world, Ben Solo too found himself lost and also possibly force abused by a mysterious dark side force user. But before all this craziness happened, before the world found out that Leia and Luke's father was Darth Vader, Ben Solo was just a normal kid following in his father's footsteps to become a starship pilot. And while he most likely had access to all the best sims money could buy, his parents weren't around to really spend that much time with him. And so it was really Uncle Luke who took Ben in and began training him in his newly established Jedi Order. And so Kylo Ren never really got any traditional military-style training until he joined the First Order. This is why we rate his training at around 6 out of 10. While Kylo Ren might have inherited the Skywalker blood when it comes to force powers and midichlorians, he also inherited the solo piloting skills, making him a pretty formidable pilot regardless of what kind of training he's had. And although we don't really see him in action too much in his modified TIE Whisper or the TIE Silencer, what we do get to see is his natural pilot instincts and force abilities combined together when he attempts to navigate through the dangerous anomalies of the unknown region. Sure, he has a wayfinder pointing the way, but it's still an incredibly challenging flight to undertake. We rate Kylo Ren's piloting skills as high as 9 out of 10. Now, this is a bit of a speculative rating that really comes from, our respect to his family lineage, which I know isn't that accurate, but, we haven't really seen Kylo Ren fly too many times in dogfights, and also, it's not like we're going to see him do anything in the near future. So let's just stick with this rating for now. From a tactical standpoint, Kylo Ren suffers from the ailment of being a superhuman. Things just become way too easy when you can literally catch blaster bolts in the air. And since Kylo Ren's side, the First Order, always has a numerical superiority against the Resistance, his tactical decisions are lazy at best. Even though it has nothing to do with starfighter combat, when Kylo Ren halts his attack on the Resistance base to duel a fake illusion of Luke Skywalker, it's kind of embarrassing, and also forces him to cede his tactically superior position. He probably could have ended the Resistance right there had he not stopped his entire army for a stupid, epic duel showdown. During his attack run on the Resistance Mon Cala cruiser, the Raddus, he again hesitates to launch an attack, even though he has a clear shot at the enemy's bridge. Sure, his mom was on the bridge, but we're talking about tactics here, and he let his emotions get in the way. We rate Kylo Ren's tactical abilities at 5 out of 10. No matter how much he swings that laser sword around, Kylo, or Ben, was still a kid. He lacks focus and goals when he enters battle. He just rages without any control. But still, Kylo Ren does have access to some of the best starfighters the First Order can create. And while the Empire was known for terrible fighter designs, the First Order actually knew what they were doing, and they actually cared about survivability when it came to their pilots. Kylo Ren also has force abilities, which brings his overall survivability to an 8 out of 10. I know some Star Wars fans don't like Rey because they believe she's undeserving of her skills. Fair enough, but it's Star Wars, guys. Most things don't really make sense in this franchise. Rey grew up with pretty much nothing, which ultimately made her extremely grateful for the things that you and I might think of as trivial, like having enough bread in our pantry, or seeing the ocean, or a forest, or heck, even a small pond or a single tree. Although she had nothing in life, Rey managed to do quite a lot with her time. She was a skilled scavenger who developed a pretty intimate understanding of the machines that she was breaking down. One of her most prized possessions was a rebel helmet from Captain Desmond Rey of the Tirfin Yellow Aces. She was most likely shot down during the Battle of Jakku. The other prized possession that Rey had was an ancient Y-wing computer which had a simulator on it. This is what she actually used to learn how to fly. Pretty impressive. Rey also found a lightly damaged freighter on Jakku with its reactor intact. She managed to repair it and even flew it before 2 scavengers stole it. Even so, desiring training is not the same thing as actually having training, which is why we give Rey a training skill of around 3 out of 10. Even with almost no hands-on training, Rey immediately shows us why she deserves to be on this list the second she gets into the Millennium Falcon. Sure, the takeoff could use some work, but the brilliant flying in between the ruins of the Star Destroyers was something that most pilots wouldn't even dare to do after a lifelong of training. Sometimes having too much knowledge is a burden. Combined with her more than ample force abilities, Rey definitely has the right skill sets and abilities to be a top pilot. But just imagine how much better she would have been if she actually had some former training and didn't grow up impoverished on what essentially is a garbage planet. We rate Rey's piloting skills at 8 out of 10. You know that freighter we were talking about that was stolen from Rey? You know why it was stolen? It's because Rey is just way too naive and kind-hearted. I mark it up to being raised on a desert with almost no life on it. It's hard to develop the right social skills and survival mechanisms that other pilots in our series have had to learn to adjust to. From a tactical standpoint, Rey lacks both traditional military training and at the same time rarely had any experience flying other than a few stints with the Millennium Falcon. A lack of training and experience leads to poor tactical abilities. But still, she managed to pull off this move, so we can't just completely disregard her natural instincts and her abilities when it comes to how she maneuvers in a dogfight. Which is why we give Rey a 4 out of 10 when it comes to tactics. What always impressed me about Rey is how good-natured she was. She's quick to make friends with individuals like BB-8 and Chewbacca, who also both happen to be excellent mechanics and both can be very helpful in the middle of a dogfight. Rey is also quite the mechanic herself. She was able to repair the Millennium Falcon's electrical and power systems, surprising even the owner of the ship, Han Solo. Plus, her Force abilities, as undeveloped as they were, did give her precognition, and any Force user on this list will get extra points in survivability because of that. Rey is no different, so we give her an 8 out of 10 when it comes to survivability. So as you can see, there aren't that many great pilots around during the sequel era, and that's kind of what happens when you have two devastating galaxy-wide wars back to back. Now, in our next episode, we'll be finally looking at the prequels, and we'll probably have the opposite problem there. Just too many aces, too many great Jedi and Sith pilots. It's going to be hard to figure this one out. Well, guys, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on that next episode. Also, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.